Huh?
Whatever we have time for, we have time for.
Come on. What I want to also show, this is kind of a Friday. We were in second graduating class. And I'll just talk a little bit about it. That was sent to me by a gal, graduate. This was, not only that I put this thing together, et cetera, but I also worked with the printers. This thing cost like $948 to publish the whole thing and all. And we also, I almost remember them, and we also had, we had some autographs, but we had some ads we sold, in a yearbook. Okay.
Buyer's ice cream.
Now, the yearbook is interesting because somebody you know was most likely to succeed. I don't know, I was going to hold this up. Okay. And then I have another one. And I have another one, forget that one. This one I thought was more important. Hey, I was a shaker. Come on, really. How many people do you know who got their name in the New York Times?
Not too many.
I mean, without robbing a bank. I was very active. I was, I guess in every school or something, somebody rises to the top. Because they work, like your mom's a worker. The rest of the people like them, let things get done. Okay, this is my book. I put it together. This was Teleporus, who's still alive, a Greek boy, and this is what he did. Now you gotta remember this thing was put together in 1938, 39. See, the editor-in-chief is somebody you know. Okay? Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Then, this was the faculty all together. This was Morris Meiser. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy. He was head of all science in World War II, colleges, high schools, military, and all. All science, education, work, physics, and and I think I wrote most of this stuff. This was Seneca Furman was the dean of boys, and this guy, a really nice guy, an older guy. And this was the guidance committee. You got to remember, I got autographs all over the thing. Then yours truly wrote this editorial. Oh, this was nice. This was something very, very new, montage. No one had ever seen it before. Interesting. And these are mostly, I think they're all faculty. This is Toby, he was a nice guy. We were at a war, and so Victory shall be ours, an editorial. Pretty good for an asshole like me. Then, as we look back, 39, 40, 41, 42, Teleporus did all this stuff. Interesting, it's kind of way out, he was a visionary artist, in other words. This is pen and ink.
Yeah.
And then they come to, they wrote stories, a case of murder, and I don't think I've read it for years. This was very, very good. And who wrote it is in the front. And then something in our school, then Time Machine, news item. It was reported today that 32 students and one teacher were missing from the High School of Science under mysterious circumstances. There are rumors circulating to the effect that this is the work of Clinton, No. Oh, Clinton was a high school dude. It wasn't President Clinton, he wasn't.
Yeah.
Then it was decent. This was like a literature book. Rooftop, I don't even remember, I forgot all this. Science Scurvy was my newspaper. Now the Science Survey was the school newspaper. I'm not going to do this again, I'm just telling you.
Okay.
Science, so we put together Science Scurvy in the middle of the thing. In other words, this was my column
Uh-huh.
in the weekly school newspaper
Mm.
called Science, was a science survey. And free to graduates, entered, it's all bullshit stuff, editor, moi. And then you'll see my name also the freaking thing, Gunga Din with apologies to Kipling. And Farley, this was the guy who was dedicated to science, Ringer's Forget, student Fantasia. There was a lot of words. I gotta read this thing again, I don't remember it. These were linoleum block prints. Do you ever work with linoleum at all?
No.
Okay, what you do, you take it looks like a cube, or any size they have, and you take out the stuff that's gonna end up in white, and you leave, you draw with pen and ink and all, so we call it linoleum block printing. It was something, okay, activities. What, the TV's going?
Yeah, this one I left on.
This is funny. This was the senior council, yours truly, little boy Bash, okay? This is the observatory, which is a newspaper, obviously me, editor-in-chief. Okay, and this is the artist help course. Okay, this was the yearbook, that's this, observatory. Yeah.
Yep.
So this was the staff, and here's my picture, here's my picture. I'm in here somewhere else, I think. I know I'm in here because I think that's me. Then the student publications, I know I'm in here someplace. I think that's me. Can you believe it, Jim? And this isn't me, this is just I happen to be doing. Class night committee, I don't think I had anything to do with that. Prom committee, I don't know. I forget it. These are the orchestras and everything like that. The dance club, student council. I don't remember if I was like, I know I was, but I don't know if I'm in the picture. And then Arista, you won't find my name there. You know what Arista is?
No.
Yeah, Arista, when I went to school, was the top, like the honor society,
Oh, okay.
and this school had brains like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, don't even ask. They went on to become ambassadors, and, you know. The soccer team, I was on the soccer team. So there. I don't even know what that is. I was on the cross-country team. Last will and testament. Let's see what this is something they used to do in all schools. To each one, the class left something to them. This is, look at this guy sitting on I thought he's sitting on a scale. This guy went on to the League, not the League of Nations, United Nations. He headed up the economics group. It was a very dear friend of mine. The fencing, under the microscope, let's see, the heaviest, the densest, everyone, the most active. Guess who? There. Heaviest, densest, eccentric, woman hunter. Spanish athlete, whatever that means. Minds are black. Most active, guess who, Laura? And on and on and on. Best with girls, Sanford Price. Oh yeah, he was, oh yes. Oh yes. And finally, the thing, now if you measure by inches, Stuart Cantor, I don't even remember him. There are a lot of Jewish boys here.
Oh.
And they were all boys. Let's see what JerryBash did.
Well,
All right,
go ahead.
JerryBash, NYU. Let's see, he was an editor-in-chief of the yearbook for 2 years, senior counsel, student organization for 5 years or whatever. Science survey, 5 years. Can't be 5 years, 3 years. Because I was only in the school 3 years. Features editor of the science survey, 3 years. Prom committee, only 2 years. Soccer team, 2 years. Journalism club, 4 semesters. I guess it must be, I don't know. Lunch squad, why did I do that? Manager of the soccer team, student organization, office squad. I don't know what the freak thing I did in the office squad. I was a very active person in the school, by far the most active. Laura gets a kick out of this. I think she's seen this before. And there was a lot of writing in here. And one of the guys here, still friendly with, lives in Florida. He was Stanley. Remember, we're looking at 17 and 18-year-old kids. You know, it's very bright. I really mean some of these guys off the wall bright. Like in today's world, wow. Fingerhood, fit. I mean, some of these guys were really, they weren't all, not all Jewish, by the way, even though everyone thinks they were. Stanley Eisnitz, that's Stanley Ernst, Laura. He's still very, very, very good-looking guy. Lived across the street from him. You could actually see his windows. Prom committee, swimming team, captain or whatever it is. Basketball team, well, he was the best one on the basketball team, and the yearbook committee. In the whole school, there were no blacks and one Oriental in New York City.
Do you want to move on to?
Yes, military. Was this being broadcast? Oh, you rat finger.
It's just
Come on.
to keep everything.
Yeah, just to keep all the information.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
It doesn't have to be so formal.
Okay, I forgot to turn it on. I thought I was just talking to you, or I would have.
Well, that's what the whole plan is. It's supposed to be just talking to me.
Oh, okay.
Just
Get
watch.
the camera.
All right, what I'm going to do now is take.
This is more recent, right?
She brought it to me. A girl who's in Northwestern University, and she sings. She's a soprano, and she mailed that to me. She went back to New York City and went to the school.
Yeah, that's a current one.
Yeah, that's
It's
a
not
current
from-
one. Yeah,
Well, yeah, I know.
It used
Because
to
now
say-
it's a co-ed school.
Oh, yeah.
it's co-ed now. It wasn't way back when. What I am going to do now, and I will try to keep it kind of brief. When I left Bronx Science, I and a bunch of my friends from Inwood went to NYU at the Heights. It was a very unusual school. It was the smallest division of the largest university in the world. There were 2,000 students in the whole school, 1,000 pre-med, which I was, and 1,000 engineering students. And it was in the Bronx. It was the same streetcar that I took to go to Bronx Science for a nickel. Instead of getting off at Creston Avenue and walking to the school on Fordham Road, I would get off on University Avenue and walk up to past a church called St. Vincent Tolentine, walk up to past my fraternity house, which was Pi Lambda Phi, and if I didn't go into the house, I would walk up the steps to the campus. And I went to high school for a nickel each way, so it cost me 10 cents a day to go to school. And I went to college for 10 cents a day. It cost me a nickel each way to go to school. So it's interesting because, you know, almost everybody lived at home. Almost nobody had cars. And it was just a different way of growing up. It's a hell of a lot different than you grow up living in
It was
Manhattan.
also a city, yeah. You
Oh,
lived
yeah.
in a
Oh,
city.
Bronx, New York City. I lived in Manhattan, which is, you know, the end, it's actually where the city is considered. What I have here is something that I kind of discussed a little bit. And what it is a writing pad that I used every evening after a mission, I would sit down with a kerosene lantern and I would put down exactly what the mission was. And as I mentioned, the first 5 missions were on other crews.
Yeah.
And the 6th mission was the first time we as a crew flew together. So when I talk about a mission, and I will not go through every one of these, the first mission was on February 7th, 1945. My birthday was February 5th, 1945. Not that it meant. Moosbierbaum in Austria. We took off at 8:20 a.m. We landed at 3:50 p.m. The bombing altitude was 700 feet.
24,700 feet.
24,700 feet. I started new. 24,000. The bomb load was 8,500 pound. RDX was high explosive. The target was an oil refinery and a storage area. Flak was heavy caliber, meaning very, very big guns. Moderate, accurate, no casualties or damage to ship. And we flew, and then what we did on the trip, okay? We were ship number 873. The second mission, actually, I don't think could be a week later.
That's
13. I think we're missing something, obviously. I don't know where 2 is. It must be in here. There we are. I knew we didn't fly. It was for 13. A week later, Vienna, Austria, which was one hell of a tough mission. We took off at 8:45 in the morning. We landed at 13:55, which is...
150.
Yeah, where Vienna was close to where we were in Italy. The total time was 1 hour 5. Total time 5 hours 10 minutes. The bombing altitude was 25,250. We carried 8 500-pound high explosive RDX bombs. The target was marshalling yards, which is where trains are put together. Flak, none, no casualties or damage to ship. Now remember, I was not flying with my own crew here, and everything in here was my idea of what was going on. And mission number 3 was 2 days later. It was Regensburg, Germany. Here again, it was a 7-hour and 45-minute mission, which is pretty good. We flew at 24. And the bomb load was 240 fragmentation bombs. Now, a fragmentation bomb is a basket about this size, about this high, and it carries inside it 250 little frag bombs with little tails. And it's like a chicken coop. It's wired into the bomb bay, and when you drop it, the wire remains, the chicken coop opens up, and all these crazy little things with little tails that weigh 2 pounds apiece go spinning down. And fragmentation means there were a lot of troops there, and that means these were against personnel, frag bombs. So, bombing load, target, Oberling Airdrome, now it explains what it was. That means they wanted the planes as well as the people there to get their jollies. Flak heavy, light, inaccurate, no casualties or damage to ship. And then some of this I say if we led the Air Force or something. Next mission, 4th mission was Linz, Austria, which was a real tough one. 6 hours and 25 minutes. The bombing altitude was 25. We had 8 500-pound, which was pretty normal. It was marshalling yards again, which are where they build up the trains and troop trains. And heavy caliber, light, accurate, no casualties or damage to the ship. That will change. The 5th mission was to Trieste, Italy. Bombing altitude 24/7. We had 8 500-pound again. It was a shipyard and docks. Flak, heavy caliber, moderate, accurate, no casualties or damage to the ship. And Trieste, of course, was a very important seaport. And I think the next mission was Knittelfeld, Austria, which was, we were now a crew. These were marshalling yards again, flak none, no casualties or damage to ship. Now that doesn't explain everything. In here I would talk what went on, and some of these things were a little, Linz, Austria again, and here, no casualties but damage to the ship. So our maximum of flak today, that means of all the missions, this is the 7th. This is the most flak we ever saw. And let's see if I can find out. Our ship had about a dozen flak holes. We had a fighter scare, that means fighters came up, and in lowering the ball turret, the door, I remember this, jammed, and the safety belt came off, meaning off the gunner. Oh, this is an interesting one. I remember Slipstream caught the ball turret, and Sachs, his name was Sachs, his last name, was hanging out into space by his safety belt. I remember this mission now as I read. I never read these things. Maddox, who was a radio operator, quickly brought him into the ship and scared the life out of him. We flew ship number 873, which was the ship we flew most of the time. And gee, I remember that mission like it was yesterday.
We only have about 30 minutes.
Okay, I'm not going to go through all 20. We're going to skip. This one was 20 miles north of Bolzano in Italy. It was a bridge, and the target was a railroad bridge, and flak with heavy, moderate, accurate. No casualties, but damage to the ship. And when I say damage to the ship, sometimes you could shit in your pants. It's that much damage. Linz, Austria again. And this one, heavy caliber, dense, accurate, no casualties, but damage to the ship. I think the plane was taken out of circulation on this mission, sent for repair.
Before. No, this was number 295.
Huh?
This was A73, and this was 295.
295 is the plane that crashed. We refused to fly it. And it crashed the next day. Now, Laura knows the story. 295, we were supposed to go on a mission on 295. The guns started going off on the ground, almost hit the gas tanker, which was 2,700 gallons of fuel, 120 octane. And all of us were very unhappy. The solenoids, or whatever the power turned on the solenoids, and the guns on the ground were shooting off caliber 50s in the air and all over the place. Everyone was diving for cover. The pilot went down the plane and said, "Do you want to go on this mission?" which was very unusual. And everyone said, "No, no." We were in the air, wherever we were going, we aborted the mission and we came back. The commanding officer made us fly up and down the Adriatic on like a practice mission, and the pilot got reprimanded. He could almost be broken in rank for refusing to fly. We were lead crew, by the way, in 295. The next day, we weren't flying, and I was going to Cherignola, which was the town. And I was in a Jeep, and I was going with another guy, and we were driving about 8 or 9 miles to town, and all of a sudden we heard ambulances and fire engines and everything else. And when we got to the USO club there, somebody said one of your planes crashed on takeoff. And then it was Captain so-and-so's flight, boom, boom, boom. When we got back, it was 295, crashed the next day. He was crushed from the waist down. He lived in Boston, Massachusetts. They flew him on a Constellation medical plane, which is the first time I had ever seen a Constellation. And this is 1945, 4-engine aircraft. It was used by the generals, and it was used as an emergency medevac. They flew him to Boston. He died a couple of days later. He was crushed by the impact of the
And that was the plane you guys refused to fly.
Huh?
That
And
was-
that's the plane we refused. He was very good to us. You don't refuse to fly. You just don't. We refused to fly that ship next day it crashed. It's not vindication. I'll tell you, we were shaking like leaves.
Okay.
Okay, flank off that's Broad, Yugoslavia. Laura was real close to Broad when we were in Dubrovnik. We flew plane 945. Then Vienna, Austria again. No casualties or damage to the ship. The main marshalling yard, here again we're doing. Wiener Neustadt, Austria. This Wiener Neustadt is very interesting. Been there many. And 10 500-pound GP. General purpose bombs. Oh, he's smart.
Good.
RDX is demolition explosive, radial demolition explosive. It did this. General purpose, like just dropping an egg on somebody. Hey, you're smart. Good. We're in 13. 14 with Bratoslavia, Austria. Bomb load, no casualties or damage. And we were back in 8. We flew this plane home, by the way. Muldorf, Germany. No casualties or damage to the ship. This turned out to be a perfect mission. In every respect, a visual run, and our bombs hit the target on the bottom. Hey, interesting. Hey, what a wonderful writer I am.
Keep going.
We flew 893 or 870. Newburgh, Germany, bombing altitude 18,700. Target an airdrome. No casualties or damage. Today's mission was planned to knock out what was left of the Luftwaffe. Ta-da! Okay? Interesting stuff I wrote when I got back. Munich, Germany. Laura's been there. No casualties, but damage to the ship. This was a very rough mission. This mission was to destroy the Munich main airdrome. You've landed there. Oh, did we land in Munich? Or, no, we took the train. Whatever. We were, whatever it was,
Yeah,
I wrote a lot on this one. Oh, we flew 468. It's very light ink. It was we made 2 runs on the target. The second time, our whatchamacallit,
Something.
yeah.
Keep going, you don't have
We
much
passed
time.
over the front lines, on the way back. That's where the Germans and the British and the Americans were all pinned down. Oh, Capititron Railroad Bridge. It's very hard for a plane like ours. 3 2,000-pound RDX bombs. Whew. We ever got hit in the bomb bay. Goodbye. No casualties or damage to the ship. Hey, we got 873 back again. We really hit the
You
target.
have 20 minutes left. Finish up your
Okay, German front lines in Italy. This is very important. This is one of the most interesting. We had 240 fragmentation bombs. The target was the German front lines. The flak, heavy caliber, heavy, inaccurate, no casualties. The British were pinned down by the Germans at Bologna, which is what this was. The Germans were under about 24 to 36 feet of dirt and logs, and the British couldn't go through to push them back. This mission, with these huge bombs, concussion, were to drive them out, to destroy, and what happened? Remember, we had
That's hysterical.
It is. Kind of interesting, we were lead crew, we flew with the general of the 15th Air Force, Nathan Twining, who loved our pilot. We flew with him, and we flew with the Germans, and we flew with the British, and we flew with the Americans. And and we flew with him about 5 of our 25 missions. We were chosen to lead all the planes in Europe back to the United States. We were number one. They said 1,000 planes. There were Navy ships all over. We actually flew from Italy to French Equatorial Africa. But before we did that, we had a steel wool the bomber, and I am very serious with steel wool to make it nice and shiny. And we had our tail gunner, Carmelo Canada, who was under 5 feet, go into the wheel wells, into the wing of the plane with belts to collapse the fuel cells, and we pulled them out and we put in new fuel cells for the flight to Tokyo. And we went first, as I said, to French Equatorial Africa. The longest runway in the world was over 2 miles long. And then we went from there to the Canary Islands. And from the Canary Islands, we went to Newfoundland. And from Newfoundland, we were hit by a Jeep in the nose, so we were no longer leading the rest of the planes. We were limping along, and the pilot said, "There's no way anyone's going to beat me." So taking off last, with approximately 1,000 planes in front of us, we landed number 3. You have no idea what was going on. And when we landed there, we were all supposed to meet at the Presidio in California to pick up our single-tail privateer B-24. We were flying a double-tail. The Navy was using the privateer.
I thought you had time off to go home.
We had 30 days at home to be with the family, and we were going to meet in California, pick up our plane and fly to Tinian. 3 days before we were supposed to, and we had our train tickets, the last time we saw the crew was in New London, Connecticut, when we landed in Connecticut. And we all expected to see each other again. We never saw each other again. We all went in different directions. And actually, I did see the ball turret gunner visited Lynn and myself when we were living in New York. And so he just happened to come through and came out to the house. And so, Albert David Sachs, the only Jew. We had a plane with 2 Jews on it. There were no other Jews in the base. And the 2, they put us on one plane, they figured they could get, well. When I didn't go to California to pick up the plane, the briefing had been that we were to fly to Tinian, which was going to be the runway where all the planes were going to take off to bomb Japan. We were going to be number 1 over the target 3 days before the physical invasion. The invasion was not the United States alone. It was Canada, Britain, the United States, New Zealand, and Australia. At that point, all the Marines would come in 3 days after we started saturation bombing, try to get a foothold. 2 days in, the Rangers would come in of these 5 countries, try to move up, and the last day would be the regular landing craft, the same as in D-Day in Normandy, with the regular troops and tanks and all the rest. And they expected 2.5 million casualties in the first 3 days and that means Japanese, Americans, Canadian, Britain, and the rest. We didn't think we would survive. We were sure that we would take the first kamikaze in our nose, but we had no choice. We were military, and we were going in 3 days before the invasion. We didn't know the target, but we were sure that it was going to be a major target like Nagoya or Tokyo or something like that. And of course, I never regretted that I didn't have to go to Japan, or I wouldn't be sitting here, trust me. And Greensboro, North Carolina was where the telegram told me to go, and I went to Greensboro, and my job there was to separate people coming back from all over Europe And a lot of the guys that I flew with in flying school and in navigation school were coming back, and all of them were telling me about so-and-so and so-and-so who was shot by the Germans when he was parachuting, or so-and-so whose plane crashed, and you know, these were guys that I flew with, and if it hadn't been for a lot of, let's say, not being the hotshot fighter pilot I wanted to be, and all the other school things, and going to all the schools along the way, I would have been in combat a lot earlier, and the chances are good I wouldn't be here.
Did you explain why you weren't a fighter pilot?
Yes, we did that all
Yes,
yesterday.
yeah, I did that yesterday.
I missed that.
I not only, I showed him we read over my little,
Why you couldn't land?
oh, no, I didn't tell that.
No,
Should
why
I tell
you
that?
could- Yes,
Oh.
why you couldn't be a fighter
All right,
pilot?
Bennisville, South Carolina, I have the book, but I'm not gonna show it to you. My final flight, and the guy, well, first of all, one of the crazy things I did, I didn't put on my parachute or my safety belt. And we were doing these kind of motions, and you rise out of your seat, not if you have a seat belt on. And the instructor pilot looks back and he sees me halfway out of the plane. And he said, I don't see any straps, meaning shoulder straps. I said, oh, I was sitting on a parachute. So he said, that means me take over. You run away. He said, don't ever do that again. He said, I was going to ask you to fly upside down. You would have been out of the plane.
You would have fallen out.
Yeah, without a parachute. Do you know what that means? He said you would have flapped your arms a couple of times, prayed a couple of times, and make a big
Splat.
yeah. But anyway, I landed too hot, what Laura's saying. It's, you know, I think I have a lot of brains, and I think I understood a lot of stuff. But I never understood that you fly by instruments and not by the seat of your pants until I washed out. In other words, instead of looking at the airspeed indicator and getting it down to 80 or 90, whatever the landing speed was, I was coming in at 120 or something like that, flying it in, beautiful landings,
Full
flying
speed
it,
ahead.
full speed ahead. And the instructor pilot kept saying to me, you're going to kill yourself and everybody on your plane. So finally he said, for the good of the Air Force and for the good of you, Jerry, I think I'm going to wash you out. In other words, go back to Nashville, Tennessee.
You said your instructor was sitting there with his rosary beads. As
Yeah. But I will say this, that I really, I did some
So you
more.
became a navigator.
So I became a navigator at Sullivan Field, Monroe, Louisiana, and there I was in charge of the yearbook. And the commanding officer said to me, Jerry, you want to go over to Europe and get killed? He said, I want you to stay on my staff, permanent staff, and do yearbooks for every class coming through. A class is coming through every 3 weeks. And I said, no. I am going to go on and fly like a jerk. Today, I'd say, knowing what I know. But anyway,
Okay, so you came back from service.
I came back from service.
Oh, why didn't you go over to Japan?
I did say, a guy by the name of Harry Ship Truman dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and one bomb on Nagasaki. And I got that telegram telling me to report to Greensboro. And actually, there's a very interesting story that I could tell about Stanley Ern's wife, who is Japanese, and what her father
But that's
actually
not your
did.
story.
But that's not my story. So I will say, it's wonderful working with Daniel and with Laura. And when I went to, when I got out of service, I got out very, very early with the high pointers. The first group got out with 85 points. I had 89. That's combat and overseas and all the rest of the stuff. And in coming back, I was a little too late to make that semester at NYU. So they told me I could sit in on classes, which I did, a lot of them. And when I came back to NYU, it's kind of interesting. I did college in 2.5 years, and I did 2 MBAs in 2 years at night. Now, the reason, when I went into service, every semester I was a Feb Sep, which means I entered college in February, and between February and September, I took 18 credits twice, that's 36, and from September to February, I took another 18 credits. So actually, in 1 year of college, I had 3 times 18, or 54 credits. What is it, 54? No, 3 times,
It's 52.
no, 6, 8, 24, yeah, 54. So in 1 year in college, I had 54 credits, so you need 126 to graduate. I got 8 credits at Syracuse University in the college training detachment for taking physics. So I had 62 credits in 1 physical year of college. So when I came back, and I went back to school, I finished college, NYU, pre-med. Well, the pre-med story is kind of interesting. When I was overseas in Italy, the flight surgeon was the world's top ear surgeon. He was married to a Hollywood actress, I forget which one. And we would talk all the time, and he would say to me, Jerry, do you know, we don't know when this thing's going to be over. You're going to have to go back, finish college, try to get into a medical school. You're Jewish, your chances of getting into a medical school are next to nil in those years. He said, so you'd have to go to France or Germany. Since you speak German, you'd probably pick a German school, and they would probably accept you. And after you finish medical school, you'd go to a hospital and you would intern, and that would be a minimum of 2 years. And after interning, you would be ready to hang out.
Or just, no, residency and then hang out.
No, no, we're talking about interning. He didn't, maybe he did say residency, and I forgot. And he said, by the time you got done, you're going to be 30 years old. And he said, if I were you, I would give up the idea of medicine. And he talked me out of it, actually. Otherwise, I came back, and I ended up, my father asked me, well, you don't want to be a doctor? No. Well, how about a dentist? Ooh! Just stand on my feet and let my piles fall out. And anyway, finally he said, well, how about a lawyer? I said, no, I hate law. He said, well, you got to do something. And of course I said, business. I think I would like business. And so that became my direction. And my first job, where I worked with my father, I ran his business while he was in Europe. It was an import-export business, very high profile import-export business.
You got your bachelor's and then you got?
I got my bachelor's degree, graduated, and then I have an MBA in marketing, and I have an MBA in foreign trade. And that I did in 2 years, and I was also going to take a PhD. I had the papers filled out, and I was at the bursar's window, and I pushed the papers under, and then I said to myself, now this is after I had met this young lady in Chicago, what am I going to get an MBA? I won't need it, et cetera, et cetera. And when I came to Chicago and I showed Laura the Seneca bill, I was sent to Chicago by Eversharp to move their general offices from 1801 West Roscoe in Chicago to the Empire State Building, which was corporate headquarters. And while I was here, I had a telephone number of someone in Chicago that was given to me by one of my brother's friends the night before I left for Chicago. And I flew into Midway, took a cab to
the airport.
Yeah, Seneca Hotel. And I went to the telephone and I called this number. And the woman who answered later became my mother-in-law. And she said, oh, Lynn's up in Michigan now. Do you want her number? I said, yeah. And then she said, to me, would you like to go out with her girlfriends someday? So I said, yeah, why not? So she gave me 3 numbers of 3 girls on the south side, South Shore, 54th Street or something like that, and I probably have their names in here. And when Lynn came back, I was invited to a Sunday brunch, and met her, and we went in the car up to Lake Geneva. She was driving, it was her car. And while I'm sitting next to her, for whatever the reason was, and I know what the reason was, I decided that I'm going to marry this girl. I had no more interest in getting married than I had jumping out of a plane without a parachute. But it just happened to work out, and the bells rang, and that was it. And that's why I'm
married for 30 years.
Married for 30 years. And I'm not going to get into the next part of my life when I met this wonderful young lady by the name of Laura.
But that's a whole different.
A whole different world. Okay. Anyway, thank you, Daniel, for the opportunity to tell a little bit of my crazy life. Very interesting, crazy life, really, Dan.